Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and it's been a while. I need to have a little bit of a break. We'll talk about that later on in the video. But we're going to be talking about Total War. Not just Warhammer 3, but in general all of Total War. Because there is reason to believe, there's been rumours around, that Creative Assembly might have been changing up their plans for everything due to pretty much everything that's been going on. So yeah, let's talk, because I feel like there's a lot to talk about. As you can see on screen, what's been here since the intro is the current known roadmap. Something that we know is going to get updated a bit after Thrones of Decay releases, but I have a feeling that after Thrones of Decay, the roadmap has been dramatically changed. There's obviously been some whispers going around that the Monkey King is after Thrones of Decay, meaning that the Slaanesh DLC has either been axed or put on hold for later down the line. Let's be honest, when it comes to Shadows of Change and obviously Thrones of Decay, a lot more work has to go into it because the DLCs are going to be larger. They're going to try and supplement that obviously with the new types of pricings that we've seen, 25 euros, but not everyone's going to buy that because they can't justify that type of cash on free factions which they might not even like. Now I do think that Thrones of Decay will end up being better than Shadows of Change. They've learned from their mistakes. The problem when having a new type of product coming out is if you don't have sufficient testing on it, focus testing by not only veterans, which I imagine they still have the veteran testers, but with other factors coming in, well, that's going to lead to a shit show. I do imagine that the rumors of Sega putting the price up was a big factor here too. There have been a lot of whispers coming around that Sega have been very, very much involved with everything that happened, and yeah, obviously they came down once again. People are praising Sega for one reason or another, but I still wouldn't call them the saviors of Total War. I think it could maybe be as much their problem as it was CA's. So I feel like the roadmap is going to dramatically change when the new one comes out. I imagine that they're going to start looking towards potentially going back to older formats, such as the old form of Lord Packs akin to that of Warhammer 2, which were the golden age for DLC. If you remember the Silence and the Fury and the Twisted and the Twilight, those were some of the best DLCs that we actually had in terms of generic Lord Packs, because the reworks were quite good. Sure, the Elf faction kind of got screwed over in the Twisted and the Twilight, but then got fixed up with an open beta and then a full patch. But ultimately, those were massive sellers. Even the Lizardmen players were super keen because Oxyotl finally gave them a campaign that was halfway bearable. It fixed up the Beastmen issues and it fixed up the Wood Elves too. The Skaven were fine because, I mean, it's Skaven, they always had the most attention. But those types of smaller DLCs ended up selling more, which ended up providing more revenue. The problem with, say, Thrones of Decay, this is the way I'm seeing it, is that all three major factions need actual faction updates. Nurgle doesn't need a rework, it just needs an update to fix up all the key problems with it, but the Dwarves and the Empire desperately do. So when you factor that, then making units for all three factions, all the other stuff that needs to come in, like unique mechanics and so on, they're actually losing money even if they're charging more because people are buying less. Which takes me on to the second note. I really do think that the Slaanesh DLC has been removed or pushed down, and the Monkey King is going to come next. We know that Creative Assembly have been hinting for the Monkey King already. This has been the case since patch 4.2, and they know it's a character which is very much requested. A lot of people are very curious about the Monkey King since we've always had Monkey King lore, but we've never actually had a full deep dive on the character, which means that this could be the big one, right? In collaboration with Games Workshop and then possibly with David Geimer once again, considering that he's already done 2 of the Old World ebooks, well, Warhammer Total War ebooks, but yeah, it's pretty much Old World lore. But the big thing here is they could easily do this as a mini race pack, charge it more than what a normal DLC would be, so more or less around the same pricing as Champions of Chaos, and there you go, right? Because this would be a mini race pack if my hypothesis is correct. They'd be doing something with loads of Monkey Warriors, the Tiger Men that have already been leaked in terms of, well, we don't know exactly what that person was doing. She's a martial artist, I believe. So it could be mocap, but yeah, this is one of the things that I imagine is linking up really heavily. The Monkey King, again, will sell, provided that the marketing is good and the race is quite unique. But this is the time for them to do something really interesting in the same way, well, not exactly the same way, but there's more the same premise as the Narnman were in Total War Three Kingdoms. This is another Cathayan faction, but so completely different with its own unique faction mechanics, faction units, and everything, which it makes it seem like if it's a race pack in its own right. That being said, I really do hope that the rumors aren't true that the Monkey King is coming this year, mostly because, look, we've just had a cafe content pack drop, the full content pack drop. I do think that going from that to then Nurgle, Empire, and Dwarves, and then another cafe drop is way too much. It was understandable when it was happening for Warhammer 2, mostly because the idea of cross-game DLC hadn't come to Creative Assembly's mind yet, which is absolutely baffling, I'm gonna be honest there, but I don't know, it just feels like way too much cafe too quick. Where in my personal opinion, I think that a cafe DLC needs to drop after maybe 2 other DLCs come out. From what we know of Warhammer 3's lifespan is there's 2 to 3 years left, I think more or less 2 now. This is something that Rich Aldridge said in an interview way back, and yeah, I'm in that point thinking it's a little bit too much cafe too quickly when there's so many races right now that need attention. You know, we still need to get the High Elves fixed up a little bit. The Dark Elves could do with a little bit of fix up. The Lizard Men desperately need a fix up. And from what we know nowadays, there is a lot of work to be done with Games Workshop with regards to Cafe and Kislev. So maybe a little bit of breathing room would be good for everyone. Which takes me up to my second note. So I feel like we can't look towards the Monkey King and all these other DLCs just yet until Thrones of Decay comes out. You might be thinking this is a bit doomer-speak, but we have to be realistic here. Creative Assembly have been, well, shitting the bed constantly. Right now, there's not a lot of money coming in, and also Sega brought down the hammer. We know about this very publicly. So, I do feel like right now, they're looking towards Thrones of Decay as this is going to be the saving grace for not only Total War Warhammer, but currently for Creative Assembly. I don't think Sega would be that stupid to shut down the studio, that's for sure, but they would put a lot more restrictions. So I think that when it comes to CA proper, not CA Sofia, we'll talk about them a little bit later, it's coming down to how well Thrones does. Remember that the main money coming into CA proper right now is Total War Warhammer. They need to make this, well, do well. Now, I'm not saying go and buy DLC whenever it gets announced, obviously especially for Thrones after everything that we dealt with after the Shadows of Change fiasco, but I imagine that Creative Assembly are going to have to start putting a little bit more effort to try and bring that money in, eventually then going down to a bit of a smaller scale DLC platform in an effort to save as much cash as possible. But that also means a little bit more quality, because quantity does not equal quality, and it's very obvious here. If it goes back to former sizes, that means that we will have more devs on smaller amounts of work, meaning that everything gets tested a little bit more, rather than whatever happened with Shadows of Change where everything was just all over the place. So long as the price is right, of course, because, you know, it'll have to go back to the old Lord Pack pricing, or maybe just slightly more, but not £20, right? That's ridiculous. It's a bit of a shame considering that we've had 2 massive DLCs prior to this, you know, the Chaos Dwarfs and obviously Champions of Chaos, which were fantastic, but I guess they ran out of momentum. Alright, we're going to talk about Total War Pharaoh now, and I know that might not be relevant to a lot of you Warhammer fans, but keep in mind it actually might be. So, Pharaoh is not doing well. Look, it's not going to survive that much longer. We know that they've got some other plans for content, which is pretty much, well, it's very much expected to be the combined map with Troy, and allowing you to be able to play as the Troy factions in Pharaoh, mostly because that was data mined day 1. Yeah, because all the Troy stuff was literally in, well, not all of it, but a lot of the game files, including the units, so literally the Amazon DLC and all that stuff was already in Pharaoh. I imagine that still is going to go according to plan, because they've committed to it, and they might as well finish off the game with a rather cool idea. Obviously, it's going to be a larger game. Pharaoh is large, well, not very large, but it's a decent-sized Total War game for a saga. So combining 2 sagas is going to make it more or less a full game. The only thing is it's going to cost more to basically play with both. So I imagine that there's a skeleton crew fixing up what needs to be fixed up before that can be launched, and then CA Sofia has been moved on to other projects. It's likely a small project has gone into the next Total War game, whatever they might be given at, because, yeah, you know, they're still going to be producing titles, I imagine. Honestly, I hope it's not going to be the situation of the rumor that was going around before Pharaoh, which accurately predicted Pharaoh, which was supposed to be like a Mesopotamia game too. At this point, they need to work on something different and something a little bit larger, because the team, it's competent. CA Sofia is actually a fairly good team. I know some people didn't really want to get into Troy or Pharaoh, but mechanically it plays well. It's a solid Total War game. The only problem is it's just very small scale. They deserve something larger. But this takes us to our other point. I wouldn't be surprised if CA Sofia was moved on to Total War Warhammer 3. Yeah, I know, it sounds really odd to say, but the thing is, they are really good at what they do. Right now, CA is kind of lacking in terms of hands, and they need help because they've just had a lot of layoffs, right? So having an extra team coming in, helping out with DLCs, might be very beneficial to them to get the cash cow coming back. Looking strictly at DLCs that were released for Troy, a lot of mechanics there are very, very unique, very interesting. Some of them you could expect in Warhammer, and hell, some of them are already there. The Amazon's warband system is what helped fix up the Warriors of Chaos. Honestly, I think a fresh set of eyes might do the game really well in terms of future content, reworks, and so on. And rumors of this started coming out since before 4.2, so yeah, straight after all the shit show, they probably started looking towards CA Sofia going, yeah, these guys are going to help us out. Obviously, it's cheaper because in terms of pay, the average pay in Bulgaria is lower than the one in the UK, even though the one in the UK gets paid pretty abysmally. But yeah, that's the cost-cutting saving that you can imagine. From a time point of view, it also kind of helps out because there's only a 2-hour time difference between the UK and Bulgaria, meaning that for a large amount of the workday, they would be working similar hours. And then when the UK office is done, CA Sofia would still have a few extra hours, 2 hours extra per day, to continue any work there too. So it's kind of like how some studios do it. If you don't know, there's actually some game studios which would actually have multiple setups across the world, and that means that the workflow can keep on going. Once one studio is done, the next one takes over, and so on and so forth. Obviously, I'm not saying that CA should do that, but they've already got the CA Sofia office. It makes a little bit of a wiggle room there. Now, I don't imagine that all of Sofia is going to be moved onto Total War Warhammer 3, but yeah, it's a small DLC group. The studio is actually quite large. There were rumors that they were working on something that wasn't even Total War 2. Though we don't know if that's been axed or not by Sega, because we do know a bunch of games were put on hold, or pretty much just fully axed. Alright, now we're going to get into deep speculation territory, the next historical, right? There have been loads of rumors. Is it World War 1? Is it Empire 2? Is it Medieval 3? Is it, I don't know, Total War My Little Pony? I know you're saying that that's not historical, but considering that everyone in Pharaoh is immortal for some reason, things could be spinned in different ways. I'm just kidding. Right, we don't know what the new historical is. There's all these very heavy rumors that it's going to be some sort of Empire 2 or World War 1 game, which I very much expect to be true, as we've heard all these rumblings about them working on a new engine. Now, the thing is, we don't know if this new engine is going to be Unreal. We know that CA have been working on something with Unreal Engine, but that could be something completely different. Hell, that could have even just been Hyenas. I'm not sure what engine they were using for that. Or it could be the newest iteration of the Warscape engine, building it from the ground up, or just totally stripping the current version and just kind of fixing that too. But it's important to note because I don't imagine that we'll be getting other new Total War games in this current engine, which is struggling. It's very obvious. It was struggling with Three Kingdoms, which was a much smaller title, but it's definitely struggling really heavily when it comes to this, this system that we've got for Total War Warhammer, where the more gets added on, the more stuff ends up breaking. How many patches do you see fixing a bunch of stuff but breaking another bunch of stuff? So a new engine or a new version of the engine is desperately needed, and hopefully it's a little bit easier to maintain than this problem that we've had so far. But yeah, next historical I imagine is going to be sometime soon. CA desperately need the money, and I think it wouldn't be out of the question to hear about it this year. Now, I'm not saying it being purchasable this year or showcased this year, but maybe a trailer going, oh, coming in 2025, because I feel like it's coming in 2025. CA had this really bad system of releasing a game a year, but if they do it every 2 years, that might actually be better off for them because it allows more time for the game to be baking in the oven, essentially, which is desperately needed. It hasn't been the case since just recent. It's been for a while, and it's something that the fan base has been crying out for a while now, because again, a game a year, while exciting as it could be, if it can't be supported to that level, then it should be spread out a little bit more. People will be much more willing to buy a game on release when it's working as intended. But yeah, I totally imagine that a historical game will be released next year. For those saying that it should be this year, believe me, you don't want that if it's going to be the same situation as before. And yeah, I mean, that could be fairly exciting. It's definitely been a while since we've seen a historical game. It just needs to be big, right? It needs to be very big. And then lastly, Total War Warhammer 40k. So we've all heard the rumors. They're getting louder and louder each day, especially as more information seems to trickle around certain content creators who know a lot of things, or better yet said, have the right people to talk to. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be obvious. It's been an obvious thing that was going to happen for around 2 years now. And this is the thing, right? I think it's going to come a little sooner than expected. My hypothesis was 2027, but I have a really strong feeling that it might actually end up being 2026. This is mostly due to how everything has been going lately, and it just kind of makes sense to have this come out sooner. Line up with that of 11th edition for 40k, and that means that you'll end up with the perfect marketing hype. Creative Assembly could then start working with some 40k YouTubers, and it would just be absolutely insane. Just put it that way, right? So yeah, it feels like it could be sooner than expected. I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for my notes video on how a Total War 40k would work. It's coming along, it's just I needed a break, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I do imagine 2026 would be very realistic to see that coming out. Hell, my theory, and that of many other creators, is that the next historical game will be focused around World War I, so gunplay gets a lot more involved, tanks and so on, because that means that it could work not only as its own thing, but also as a testing ground for how 40k would fully work. Well, not fully, but you know what I mean. The basic skeleton would be very much the same, and again, it benefits one project to the next. Same reason how Warhammer benefited Three Kingdoms or Troy, mostly because, you know, single entities in Three Kingdoms, such as the characters, or, well, you know, all the monstrous types of stuff in the Mythos DLC. They kind of overlap. It happens very often. The same framework was used for all the historicals going forward from basically the first game onwards. So this would be the start of a new framework. So yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but I very much imagine it sooner rather than later. Alright, and this takes us to our last segment when it comes to Warhammer 3. Yes, we're going back a little bit, because I do think that the moment that Total War Warhammer 40k comes out, Warhammer 3 is dead, which is a massive shame, but I guess it kind of makes sense. They'd be moving on to a new engine, which would be easier to work. The only way I could see Warhammer 3 lasting is, well, either a Warhammer 4 game, which is on the brand new engine. However, that would be stupid expensive, and I don't think that they'd want to do everything again, especially for just a one-time price, and they'd need to offer a lot more to kind of fix things over. Or they keep this current version of Warscape alive for one project and then have a smaller team working on DLC every now and then. Maybe something along the lines of CA Sofia, maybe. It depends. Maybe a small team from there could keep the project going, keeping the relationship there, just to keep things, you know, generating cash, because it would still be a cash cow. Even if the new engine is much better, this would still make money as long as the product is fairly good. But I do imagine that we won't see a lot of DLC coming near the end. They'll probably do some large end times DLC, make everyone relive that PTSD, and boom, right? On to the next setting, which is something that we've seen. But I wouldn't be surprised if we do get Sofia working on stuff. Again, it's just the whole situation of what Sofia did for Rome 2. Yes, the situation was a little bit different. Essentially, the only reason why CA Sofia was doing Rome 2 DLC was because they were recently acquired and they had to prove their mettle because they had nothing else that CA Sofia could do. But that's why CA Sofia existed, and then they were sent off to work on their other projects. But yeah, this is stuff that I've been thinking about for some time now. 4.2 kind of just made me think about it a little bit more, and I feel like it's something that we need to talk about because, yeah, you know, this affects us as the fan base towards this franchise. I wouldn't be surprised if everything stated here comes to pass. You know, I've been hearing rumors here and there, and it just kind of makes sense. I just hope that things get a little bit better. Obviously, again, Thrones of Decay will be a big deciding factor to see how CA is doing, but yeah, this is more realistic rather than not. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. I do apologize that I've not been posting for a while. I had to take a break. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I'm under a lot of stress IRL. They've been dealing with a lot of matters to do with some family members and so on, and I've just been tired. This is the problem when my channel is a one-man operation. Everything is me. I do all the videos, I edit them myself, the armies for the battle reports and so on, I'm the one painting them up, rebasing them, making sure that they're all good to go. Streaming is something that I'm probably going to put aside for a while, because I'll be honest with you, look, it's like 8-hour streams that I do, and that could be 8 hours better yet served on other stuff on the channel, which is frankly a little bit more important at the moment. Like, I normally put around 60 to 70 hours a week into the channel stuff, which means that there is a lot of time that I'm putting into this because my form of content isn't the same as a lot of other people. I don't do Let's Plays, right? So I have to make sure that the topics are kept fresh and we're talking about loads of different things. I just don't like the Let's Play form of content. So with that, and then everything piling on, like I've had a bit of an issue with my grandfather falling ill recently and actually physically falling, which means that he needs a little bit more physical care, and it's a lot of paperwork to do, and yeah. So as you can imagine, stress kind of builds up, and I'm one of these people who let it build up and then just crash, and that's a really bad flaw of mine, and I'm really trying to overcome that. So yeah, I think that's my goal for 2024, just trying to be a little bit healthier for my own sake, because I'm not getting any younger, and it's very obvious. But yeah, have a good day, guys. I do apologize for this rant here, but I feel like it's very important to have a little bit of transparency with you guys, especially with what's going on behind the scenes. So yeah, I'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.